I think it was the great political philosopher Kermit the Frog who said it ain't easy being green, and certainly that came true this week. I mean, what do you make of the schism that we've seen in the Green Party this week with Jenica Atwin's defection and the kind of lukewarm statement from the remaining caucus about Annamie Paul?
Well, the renewed outbreak of extended and serious violence in the Middle East is a test of just about all political actors. In the new kind of Twitter-dominated, polarized environment, it's really hard to be nuanced on these things, and it's not that surprising. I bet there are similar discussions happening over Israel versus Palestine within the NDP and perhaps even in the Liberal caucus, but the Green Party is so fragile that it just busted wide open. And I continue to think there's more potential for growth in the Green Party in Canada than anywhere else if some people who are savvy on political marketing, social media, just took that party as a blank slate. They could go really far, but unfortunately no one's proved able to do it. And instead, it looks like the Liberals are getting ready to mow their lawn.
Megan, what's your sense on this whole week?
You've got a leader with no seat and very little voice in the national stage. You've got a very touchy issue with the Israel-Palestine. You've got a member who has somewhat of a presence within the party and is already hopping on the issue, which many, not just people within the parties, are the NDP and Green Party, but also within Indigenous communities. Jenica Atwin's husband is a councillor with the First Nation. I mean, the fact is that, Indigenous peoples feel a great deal of solidarity with those in Palestine, and the fact is that this is an issue that, unsurprisingly, has burst open the Green Party, but as also, I think, an issue that is going to pose this is like a litmus test for other political parties, and I think the Green Party is, in a position where certainly it isn't the Elizabeth May Party any longer.
Mia, what's your take on the Greens' bad week?
It was interesting to me that Jenica Atwin is leaving the Green Party over their positioning and the internal disputes about their position on the Middle East to go to the Liberal Party, which seems to have a position that is very much more aligned with Annamie Paul's than with her own. So it says to me that this is a driver, but it's that just sort of the disagreement is what drove her out, but that there was more to it. And I think, it was mentioned before, Annamie Paul does not have a seat in the House. When Elizabeth May was in that position, she also didn't have a caucus. She was the Green Party at the time. There is now three
Party of one.
The official comments of the party are mine, and I'm going to make them in a careful way. I have never gone, nor would I ever go onto social media or in the mainstream media with the intention of doing anything to undermine the work or the reputation of our MPs.
The fallout from MP Jenica Atwin's defection from the Greens to the Liberals continues today. Green Party leader Annamie Paul says Atwin's decision predates recent party infighting over issues like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But New Brunswick Green Party leader David Kuhn disagrees on the costs.
It's not easy when a staffer in the federal leader's office is out in the media, not only criticizing you, but suggesting they're going to work against your re-election.
Okay, can the Greens recover from this floor crossing and what led to it? The power panel is with me for one last round. Marty, Paul, Mia, and Nigan. Mia, I'd like to start with you and sort of pick up on the point from David Kuhn. I mean, this is in some ways about a disagreement over the Israel-Hamas violence of recent weeks, but in a lot of ways about the way one of Annamie Paul's advisors treated Jenica Atwin for her position on this, calling her anti-Semitic and vowing to defeat her and Paul Manley. The leader's advisor vowing to take out 2/3 of the caucus. That seems like a real problem.
It certainly does, and I think that it was really a sign of just sort of how bitter some of this normally behind the scenes arguments were going. We don't often get this front seat view of these kinds of conversations that we got with the Greens. Although with the Greens you sometimes do, because they don't necessarily have the same level of secrecy or ability to keep those secrets as maybe the other parties have become adept at. But it's maybe worth noting that Annamie Paul trying to say that this was about more than just this event, where Jenica Atwin has actually disagreed and said pretty much this is what precipitated it.
Yeah.
She she was not happy with how everything went down. She clearly wasn't happy with how the leader responded, and what the results were. And so she's leading on an issue. But as I said earlier, she's going to a party that actually agrees more with Annamie Paul on this particular issue. So I think it's a sign of how the party's being run more than where Jenica Atwin sits on this particular issue for her.
Yeah, Marty, that's my sense of it too. It's less the particulars of the policy disagreement and more of this personality conflict and treatment. And you know, as Atwin says, it was about what Noah Zatzman posted about her, and you know, Annamie Paul said yesterday it wasn't, but then her entire caucus came out with a statement that corroborated Jenica Atwin's version of events. Elizabeth May and Paul Manley saying it was the advisor that did it.
Yeah, you know, I don't want to disparage Annamie Paul, but obviously this is, you know, you're a rookie leader, and this is the kind of thing that you have to deal with, and you'll probably botch it. It just so happens that this is being done very publicly. To be fair to her, if you look at the history of the Green Party movement around the world, started sort of early 70s, is that this issue, specifically the Israel-Palestine issue, has dogged the movement since its beginning. This is a 50-year-old problem that you know, the Greens simply can't seem to get around. It's something that happens, that comes up every once in a while. It usually has to do with one of the intifadas or with, you know, the recent events in Palestine and Israel. And it continues to savage the party, movement, not outside of Canada as well. Everybody's talking about how the Jenica and Atwin move to the Liberals is a coup for Liberals, and it certainly is, certainly on the progressive side. But as Mia mentioned before, you know, this is not a person that has, as they say in French, sa langue dans sa poche. She doesn't necessarily keep quiet on these issues, you know. And she talks about, you know, standing with Palestine and calling Israel apartheid and this kind of thing. That will not play very well at all within the Liberal caucus, and that's going to be the interesting thing for me to watch.
Paul, how do you think the Liberals do manage that? I mean, Atwin obviously is going to be strong on this. She has been strong on this. But, you know, we have seen people like Wayne Long in New Brunswick, you know, defy them on small business tax policy in the past. And he ran again. They campaigned for him. Nate Erskine-Smith often deviates from the mainstream of Liberal consensus. I mean, we don't see Cameron Ahmad sending out statements saying, I'm going to take you out. I mean, how do you think they handle it?
Yeah. I don't think they're going to have much problem. Stipulating that Jenica Atwin has strong convictions on this and means what she says and will continue to think what she has been saying. But things are easier when you're in a winning party. I'm pretty sure the pitch to her said something like, since you were in the Green Party, all you were able to run was your Twitter account. But now if you've got a concern, you can talk to the foreign minister. If you've got a concern on what theoretically is the raison d'etre for your political commitment, the environment, you can have coffee with the environment minister. You can affect these things directly. And you won't have to run your Twitter account, hint, hint. I mean, I think that'll be about as far as it'll go. I do think this is a coup for the Liberals, and I think it shows, as floor crossings often have shortly before elections, where ordinary MPs think their bread is buttered. And I think Jenica Atwin figured that she's still going to be able to talk to the environment minister after the next election, and it's going to be the same environment minister because the Liberals are looking pretty good right now.
Right, and just in the electoral math, Fredericton puts it back in the Liberal column. Jack Harris announced he's not running today. That's another seat in Atlantic Canada that maybe the Liberals have a shot at. But, you know, Nigan, the Greens pride themselves on letting their members speak their mind, and boy, they spoke this week. I mean, does that become a bit of a challenge for any kind of a party that's trying to make the leap?
No, I think Marty's history lesson about the Green Party is absolutely bang on in that it talks a lot about how the Green Party in Canada, the Canadian version anyways, has really lacked an ability to find an issue other than the environment in which they can hang their hats on and take up that space. And as you can see, if Jenica Atwin is going to the Liberals and the Liberals can use that to say, well, look at our environmental policy as endorsed by a former Green Party member. I memean, they certainly have a coup on their hands. They will be stuck, however, when Atwin's position on pipelines become public, and you have an anti-pipeline person who then begins to tweet openly about the government's owning of a pipeline. So you'll have some major issues. I think it was kind of ironic, frankly, that Atwin's turning to and her argument for why choosing the Liberals had much to do with their Indigenous policies. Whereas this would not be the time, I think, that we would be looking at the Liberals' Indigenous policies as being particularly successful. So I think it's a weird move that Atwin's trying to find. Of course, Atwin's she's a politician seeking for her own re-election, so perhaps that looking for the best case scenario. But it's also has set up a very difficult ethical problem for herself, an ethical problem for the Liberals, and I think more challenges for the Greens going forward into the future, which was probably already there in the first place with a particularly weak leader in terms of profile.
Yeah, just some context on the reconciliation. Atwin's husband, Chris Atwin, I believe is his name, is a band counselor with the Oromocto First Nation in New Brunswick. So she a deep personal connection on that issue, for context purposes. But Mia, picking up on the Israel-Palestine Hamas issue, the Conservatives put out a statement today saying they're now the only party that stands with Israel, trying to leverage Jenik Atwin back against the Liberals. How much of an issue could that be for the Liberals to manage going into an election?
Yeah, you saw that happen in the question period this morning. Peter Pence going after the Liberals for accepting her and accepting what he was alleging as an anti-Semitic MP coming into the Liberal caucus. Mark Garneau sort of trying to shut that down by saying that the Liberals' position on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is clear, that they don't accept the word apartheid, which has been used by Jenik Atwin. So they're trying to push it to shut it down. But it's sort of been amusing to me in the last few days how all of the parties have seen this and found their own way to try and make it work for them, except perhaps the Greens, who really can't make this work for them in any possible shape.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. We're going to bring our G4 summit to a close. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you, Mia, Paul, Marty, and Nigan.